What's good, ladies and gentlemen? So welcome to another SK Wealth Academy podcast in which I am going to discuss the question, are we living in the most immoral and cowardly times ever? Now, before I get started to what some of you may think is a curious question, I want to thank my most recent patrons that signed up within the past couple of days, Thomas, Amanda, and Jeff, as well as give my gratitude to my continuing patrons, including my patron that was with me since day one, way back when. And because without your support, I wouldn't be able to upload this content on YouTube, and your support also keeps my blog at malamalama.com/WordPress. I'll put all the links in the YouTube description below. So if you're curious and have not checked out my other platforms by which I release information, just feel free to go to the description of this video in YouTube and you can find it. And if you want to also become a new supporter of mine, please visit patreon.com/SK Wealth Academy, and you will find the benefits of different levels of patronage. But the most expensive level is $5 a month for almost everything, and then there's a extra one for those that want to be extra generous for $10 a month. So let's get started. So why would I ask the curious question of, are we living in the most immoral and cowardly times ever? Because certainly we think that we have evolved as a human race, right? And especially given the progression of technology, the comforts of society, the evolution of governments and the rule of law, we think back to the times of Genghis Khan and Viking explorers, when there was looting, raping, rampaging, and destruction and theft of people's personal properties, as well as captives and enslavement of captives back then. Certainly, we have to have more morality and courage in today's times than versus those times in which sometimes chaos, murder, and savagery ruled. Whoever was the most homicidal and savage was basically able to rule societies back then. So why would I ask this question? Well, given the ability of the few hundred to say the few thousand richest people in the world to basically impact the quality of life literally for every citizen on planet Earth today, as they make decisions of whether or not we should go to war. They implement monetary policies of an unethical fractional reserve banking system all around the world. They make political decisions that impact everyone's lives. The question remains, and I pose this question, which I want all of you to comment below as far as what your opinions are in this matter, because of the fact not that we're more savage as a human race today, or more immoral or more cowardly, but those that rule, the few thousand that rule over the billions of us today, have an ability to impact far more people. In fact, billions, the quality of lives of billions of people today. So because of reach due to what we could say is the Internet of everything, of how everything is connected, not only through technology, but also through international travel, as we've seen with the impact of the Wuhan coronavirus. I think this is a really viable question to ask today. And for example, in recent history, we won't have to look much further than the coronavirus I just mentioned, because Chinese government officials handled that very poorly, and they attempted to cover up the severity of the viral epidemic when it was first starting out in late 2019. In fact, Dr. Li Wenliang was among 8 Chinese doctors that tried to sound the alarm about a very rapidly spreading dangerous virus in Wuhan, but they were silenced by Wuhan officials. They were reprimanded, rebuked, and they were told to stop spreading lies and disinformation. But we now know that they were telling the truth. And so, unfortunately, Dr. Li passed away after contracting the virus himself, but before he died, he said, quote, "If the officials had disclosed information about the epidemic earlier, I think it would have been a lot better. There should have been more openness and transparency," end quote. And certainly the Chinese government is getting a lot of criticism today for how they handled the start of this epidemic and trying to hide it. But I remember in reading a book by epidemiologist Laurie Garrett called The Coming Plague about 10 years ago. This has always been the history. It's just not the Chinese government that reacts this way. Other governments in developed nations and also in undeveloped nations have reacted in crisis this way. Even though I read the book 10 years ago, it was published in 1995, so the SARS epidemic had not yet happened, but so it discusses mostly like Ebola, the Ebola crisis in Africa, HIV epidemic in Western nations, and the Lassa virus epidemic. So, but in discussing these epidemics, she discusses each time how governments covered up the reality of the situation, because like the Chinese government, for example, the Chinese government is more about like saving face, that they're in charge, they're in control, everything is under control. We don't want to lose face in the fact that the Communist Party is not handling this situation perfectly. But in other Western nations, it's not about saving face because it's a different culture, but it is about not wanting to unnecessarily spread panic. So they suppress the truth a lot of times far beyond what they should, and don't allow people to take preventative measures and understanding the nature of the challenging virus that is afflicting populations so that they could prevent infection. And then Weibo, which is a social media platform that's super popular in China, the popular hashtag, because Chinese citizens were very upset about the cover-up of this epidemic, the Wuhan coronavirus, when it first started. There's a hashtag, "We want freedom of speech," that was going viral on Weibo until censors deleted the hashtag. So, you know, when we look at that case, it's very easy to criticize the Chinese government and how they handled that situation and how they're still handling it. But if we look across the board, this is why I ask if we're living in the most immoral, cowardly times ever. We see the same behavior, just not due to some viral epidemic in this case, but we see in freedom of speech all the time. Julian Assange, what has the entire Western press done to support him? I'm not talking about independent, courageous independent media, independent journalists, but still, even then, you can count probably in one hand the number of journalists that have supported him in the independent media and have been outspoken in their support for him. I'm talking about journalists, so not people like Roger Waters and other people that supported him. But in the mass media, the entire Western press has been silent about any support for Julian Assange. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with this case, basically he was under house arrest in the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK for exposing war crimes, U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, and which also included the murder, I believe, of 2 innocent Reuters journalists that were on the scene that were murdered, that would have undoubtedly exposed these war crimes as well. So in all his reporting through his platform WikiLeaks, Julian Assange has never once been accused of lying or providing information that has ever endangered the lives of any U.S. citizens. Yet he's been imprisoned for essentially telling the truth, the most important principle of journalism. Yet no journalist, except, like I said, a scattered few in the independent media, has stood up for him and supported him. And even politicians like U.S. President Donald Trump that boldly proclaimed, "I love WikiLeaks." Those were exact words, "I love WikiLeaks," during his campaign to become U.S. president, because they exposed a lot of reprehensible, immorally indefensible behavior of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. For political expediency, Donald Trump said he loved him. But yet, after he became president and had more power to actually support WikiLeaks, Donald Trump said, basically, I'm paraphrasing him, that he knows nothing about Julian Assange, and he went dark in his support for him. So I'd say cowards, all of them, all state leaders that don't support freedom of speech in this case, and don't support people that truly try to shine light on darkness. Now, when we look in the corporate world, there's just as much cowardice and perhaps even more hypocrisy in their words. Because if you look at Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, he said basically, tech company, he said at Wired, which is a tech magazine, at a Wired anniversary party in San Francisco in 2018, quote, if big tech companies are going to turn their back on the US DoD, Department of Defense, this country is going to be in trouble. We're going to continue to support the DoD, and I think we should, end quote. So, prior to that, his company Amazon had gained a 10-year, $600 million contract with the CIA, which is very questionable. But he was up for a bid on a much bigger $10 billion contract for a cloud data contract with the Pentagon. And he was bidding against Google and also Microsoft. Now, Microsoft eventually won out over Amazon, even though Amazon was in the lead to win that. And Google, as horrible as they are, because they censor a lot of information in their search engine algorithms that don't agree with the narratives of the owners of Google and the founders of Google. It's not a platform, an internet search engine that supports freedom of speech. Even they, as reprehensible as Google has been, they removed their bid for this Pentagon contract because they said the terms of that contract and what they would be required to do oppose their principles of artificial intelligence. And then Microsoft employees also published an open letter on another tech magazine, Medium, in which they urged Bill Gates. Well, actually, I think Bill Gates is not officially running the company, but they urged Microsoft executives, or at least he has a far smaller hand. He's like handed over a lot of the corporate responsibilities to other executives, I believe, at this time. But they urged the Microsoft executives not to take the contract because they wrote, many Microsoft employees don't believe that what we build should be used for waging war, end quote. And, but of course, Jeff Bezos, being the man of hypocrisy, he opposed Google's and Microsoft employees' opinions about the Pentagon $10 billion cloud data contract. Because he said, quote, one of the jobs of the senior leadership team is to make the right decision even when it's unpopular. This is a great country and it does need to be defended, end quote. So it's so hypocritical because obviously that contract was about money. He's like, the right decision is about making billions more dollars for myself. Because if you look at his history of how he treats not only subcontracted workers working in China that manufacture his Amazon products like the Echo and also Kindles, it was down to other companies to reprimand Bezos for how poorly he treated subcontracted workers that made Amazon products, because an investigation by the Observer and also the US-based China Labor Watch concluded that there were a lot of, quote, unethical and illegal practices happening at these Chinese factories that manufacture Amazon products in Henyang, China. And even Amazon's own auditors that visited Foxconn in China, which also manufactures some Amazon products. Foxconn you may have heard of because they're infamous for having a very high rate of suicide amongst its employees for reprehensible working conditions, because Foxconn also manufactured iPhones and other Apple products. And they concluded that Foxconn, that manufactured Amazon products, had hired an illegally high number of agency workers, forced them to work illegal amounts of overtime, sometimes up to 80 hours of overtime during high season, when legally they could only make them work 36 hours, and then they did not pay them time and a half as mandated by overtime labor law, but paid them the same low wages of about $2 an hour they paid them during regular time. And I think actually at Foxconn they may have paid them a little higher, but I know at the subcontracted factories they only paid them $2 an hour, even though Jeff Bezos is worth what, 130, 40, 50, 150 billion dollars his net worth is, and he could easily pay them 5-10 times as much and still make billions of dollars a year. But he says he's proud of how he treats his workers, and this is just not reprehensible labor practices enforced by Amazon and Bezos in developing nations, but also in developed countries, because the Daily Mirror conducted an investigation of working conditions at Amazon warehouses in England, and they concluded that the workers led a, quote, brutal life, end quote, because they were put up to the task of fulfilling unreasonable expectations, performing lightning fast packing speeds, while dealing with very heavy lifting and very long hours. In fact, one of the workers they interviewed, Mr. Selby, said Amazon really could afford to enforce lesser hours, so they'd have shorter work days, normal 8-hour work days, in which they wouldn't be perpetually lifting heavy items, and they could hire more staff. But he concluded, the Amazon worker, that's not going to happen, because he said Amazon can make far greater profit margins treating them poorly. And again, these same type of accusations also emanated not just out of England, but also from Germany, also from American warehouses as well. So the problem is that businesses see such corporate practices as ethical, because they have bastardized the language of ethics to mean anything that serves the interests of the business, regardless of how crappy they treat their own employees. So it's interesting, because I am all against this type of word porn and Orwellian doublespeak, and I've been got into an extended debate. It wasn't a heated debate, it's a very cordial debate, but with a fairly well-known journalist, about the danger of journalism embracing these terms and this twisting of language. Like, my discussion with him is that we should keep language pure. But his argument was that because ethical was no longer used in the corporate world to mean moral or right or wrong, but only what is best for the business or the business executives, that they would continue to describe things as completely immoral and not ethical as ethical in the corporate world when writing about corporate situations. But my argument was that if you looked up the meaning of ethical in a dictionary, whether it's the Cambridge Dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, or whatever various dictionary, Merriam-Webster Dictionary, they all say that ethical relates to beliefs about what is, quote, morally right and wrong, end quote. So my argument again with this journalist is, why should we change the definition, bastardize the definition of ethical to mean something entirely different for a corporate CEO, whereas we would describe his behavior as ethical inside the workplace and moral inside the workplace, but immoral or unethical outside of the workplace. I said we shouldn't bastardize the word ethical like that. And I believe that's completely wrong for journalists to do, because if we resort to word porn to satisfy what other people want and destroy the integrity of language, then my argument is that we would soon be bastardizing the definition of moral as well, and reporting reprehensible immoral behaviors such as the killing of innocent people in war or in claimed self-national defense as moral in the future. And in fact, that's really happening, as I will discuss in just a bit in the same video. But let's talk about financial cowardice, because there's a lot of that going on right now. Let's talk about billionaires that know beyond any reasonable doubt, because they've become obscenely wealthy by gaming the banking and monetary system, who know the fractional reserve banking system has been rigged to give them unfair systemic advantages over everyone else in continuing to build greater wealth than everyone else. And that's led to obscene levels of wealth inequality, where organizations like Oxfam have said the 8 wealthiest people in the world now own the same wealth as the bottom 50% of the world's population, which would be, 3.7 billion people or something like that. And also in America, where the top 0.1% own the same wealth as the bottom 90% of American citizens. And what has enabled these obscene levels of inequitable wealth is the system. And I'm telling you, I'm 100% sure these billionaires know it, but they won't speak out about it. And they'll just say, they have said things like, there's been some famous hedge fund managers in America that said, oh, everybody knows there's something wrong with the system, but they don't specifically mention what's wrong with the system because they benefit from the system. So they're so cowardly, they won't speak about it. And I've spoken about it. That's what led to my SK Wealth Academy YouTube channel getting shadow banned and capped at 30,000 subscribers, and none of my subscribers ever getting informed, even after clicking the notification bell of new content I was uploading. So that's why I had to start this second YouTube channel and try to build it up from the bottom again, back up to 30,000 subscribers. So again, if you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed and you support information like this, please do me a favor and just hit that subscribe button, because that really will help information like this spread, because we're facing an uphill battle right now. We're like salmon, swimming up that stream to spawn, constantly swimming upstream in this battle of trying to light up the darkness. And, all those billionaires, I know they know that's not their hard work or their intellect or what they love to claim, their higher level of business acumen that allow them to keep accumulating far greater wealth than everyone else. It's due to simply the systemic advantages built into an inequitable global monetary and banking system founded by very unethical people. And in fact, you will learn about this topic in the next couple months, because I'm planning to launch my SK Wealth Academy, a 20-course academy with more than 3,000 pages of written materials and hundreds of hours of audio materials that will explain situations like this that's entirely missing from every business curriculum of every academic institution in the entire world right now. But what I do know is when you speak power to truth, those that hate truth will try to shut you up and censor you. And they will, and also those that only care about money also will resort to cowardice, because they will shut up and start praising their very oppressors instead of exposing them. And as I said, I received an extreme amount of clapback and pushback from YouTube, which is owned by Google, and even on my Instagram account, because just this past week I posted a couple of stories in which I was describing the unreported future economic consequences of the Wuhan coronavirus, and they kept getting deleted, automatically deleted. I mean, the post would post for about 5 minutes and then would be wiped off of my Instagram timeline. And that happened for 2 straight days. All my posts were getting deleted. So I actually thought my Instagram account was about to be deleted. And that's crazy, because I only have like a couple hundred followers on Instagram. That is crazy that was happening to me, because I started that from scratch again. It was just like my YouTube channel. And the fact that they're still trying to censor me. And in fact, in those posts that were getting deleted, I talked about the likely, it was my opinion, but I said, here are some companies that are likely going to suffer negative economic consequences as a result of the severity of the Wuhan coronavirus. And I said Apple, Tesla, Starbucks, because they have either large portion of services in China, so a large amount of the revenues, or large manufacturing plants in China, as well as other hotel chains. You can go read it. It's on my blog, as well as other liquor manufacturers. And I read articles about how social media platforms were basically erasing and censoring any postings that they consider to be disinformation. So I said, oh, okay, well, I guess they consider that to be disinformation. But just, 11 days after I posted that, then there's a story about Apple now downgrading their revenue and growth projections due to the coronavirus. So exactly what I predicted happened, but yet they say social media platform owners want to say I'm spreading disinformation because they hate truth. They basically hate truth. And one other last area that I want to discuss is just real briefly is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Because I always believe that morality has no boundaries, no religion, no nationality, no ethnicity, no politics. And slaughtering and murdering of innocent children, women, and men is wrong in any possible situation, no matter if you're affiliated with a group that's doing the wrongdoing. So last year we had that conflict in which 189 Palestinians were killed, and it was a UN human rights group that did this investigation, and they conducted 325 interviews, had over 8,000 documents. They reviewed video footage, drone footage from the protest in which nearly 200 Palestinians were killed, and they concluded 183 were shot with live ammunition, including 35 children, 3 health workers, 2 journalists. Why are journalists being shot at with live ammunition? And including 6,106 people that were wounded. And in this case, any innocent person that is wounded or killed, that's morally reprehensible. And so there's really no question. But if you question anything, and in this clash, only 4 Israelis were wounded in the clashes and none were killed. If you question and raise questions about morally reprehensible behavior, because they're very powerful pro-Israeli lobbying groups, are very well funded, that will smear anyone that questions such things as anti-Semite, that falsely label you and cowardly label you and try to smear you, ruin your reputation. There are people that won't speak out. And what I have to say about this, well, I know in my heart, right, I'm not prejudiced or biased against anyone based upon religion, race, nationality, ethnicity, political party, whatever other affiliation, vegan, non-vegan, meat eater, doesn't matter. I don't have any hatred for people based upon any type of irrational bias. My criticisms only arise out of what is right and what is wrong. So I have my own framework of morality that I developed that I feel very strongly about. And when I feel something is wrong, then I'm going to put out people that do stuff that I feel is wrong on Front Street. And I believe that nobody should ever remain silent for fear of having their reputation unfairly smeared by cowards, because that's cowardly in itself. And I understand people that, for example, with the Syrian Duma case, there's an organization for the prohibition of chemical weapons. There was a journalist, Max Blumenthal from Gray Zone, that said he spoke to some of these people that produced the report, and they said they knew about numerous inconsistencies in the report that basically were manufactured out of thin air, that there was no evidence of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad waging chemical gas chlorine attacks against people in Duma, but they said they remained silent because they were opposing very powerful and scary people that they believed would either physically harm them or perhaps even kill them and their families for speaking the truth. So in those instances, when you fear physical harm against yourself and people you love, or even possibly death, because Max Blumenthal said these people said they didn't want to have to worry about crossing the street and getting run over by a car, then I can understand their silence. But what I cannot excuse is our silence and believing all the narratives relayed to us with a lack of evidence, with zero evidence. And I cannot excuse our laziness in rooting out the truth when the truth is available to all of us. Because like I said, Gray Zone is a great source of independent media truth about a lot of instances that opposes a lot of the mass media narratives. And I'm saying even when you find a great source of truth, I'm not saying to blindly believe everything. You have to basically be willing to look at different sources for different independent media sources and not just willingly accept everything. Because I've researched other things I found on Gray Zone. I don't agree with everything that is written on that site, and I've highly disagreed with some other things that I've read on their site. So you still have to put in your legwork, and what I just can't excuse is our laziness and our ignorance and unwillingness to do so. And regarding the Wuhan coronavirus, I will say go check out Zooming In with Simone Gao, and that is a YouTube channel, and they've done a lot of great independent investigative research in Wuhan itself that conflicts with a lot of the Chinese state produced data about what's really going on. So I would say recommend going and checking out that site as well. So let me know what you think below. Do you feel as though many people take up the side of the immoral and the wrong due to their successful disinformation campaigns? Because I feel heavily a lot of times that people take up the side of the wrong because they're simply influenced by disinformation. And if so, what do you think we can do to reverse this trend? I really would be interested in hearing your comments, and as I mentioned before in prior videos, I'll respond to all comments posted within 12 hours of release of this video. And that about wraps it up. So as always, remain intensely curious, and until next time, if you stayed to the end, thanks so much for watching until the end. Take care.